Welcome to 5 Good Minutes. You're listening to today's inspirational message on the book of Mark with Kurt Bjorklund.
As we turn to Mark 4, it begins with a well-known and well-loved parable, the parable of the sower. It's a simple story Jesus tells. He says that the kingdom is basically like a sower who goes out to sow his seed, and some falls along the path and the birds come and devour it. Other seed falls on the rocky ground where there isn't a lot of soil and it springs up for a short time. But because of the lack of depth, when the sun rises and its scorching heat hits it, and since it has no root, it withers. And then some seed falls among the thorns, and it grows, but it's choked, and it yields no fruit. And then there's seed that falls to the good soil, and it grows and increases and yields 30, 60, 100-fold, we're told. And then Jesus simply says, "He who has ears, let him hear." And then he explains the purpose of parables before coming back and explaining this specific parable. And I will talk for a moment about the purpose of parables tomorrow, especially the little quote that's here. But when he says this, here's the explanation. He says, "The sower who sows the word, these are the ones along the path where the word is sown, and Satan comes and takes away the word that's sown in them." So there are some that are hard-hearted and just never respond. He says, this is what you should expect. And then he says there are some that are sown among the rocky ground. This is where they hear and immediately receive it with joy, but they have no root, so they endure for a while, but tribulation and persecution is what comes and they fall away. And so there are some that don't have a lot of depth. It's shallow faith. And then there's some that he says are like the seed among the thorns, that are those who, because of the cares of the world, the deceitfulness of riches, and the desire for other things, enter in and choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. And so this is somebody who's got the cares of the world that are crowding out their faith. So it's worries, wealth, and wants that they consistently prioritize over faith. And then he says, but there's good soil, the ones who hear the word and accept it and bear fruit. And again, he repeats this 30, 60, and 100-fold. And so this is a way for Jesus to talk about the salvation experience, and that there are those who hear the word and appear from an outward standpoint to get it, but they won't endure. Partly persecution and trouble, and they didn't have depth. Now, you could read this and say, well, then it's about the person who sows, making sure that they sow it deep enough. Maybe. But then he has the story about the stuff that's choked out by thorns. And again, you could say, well, it's up to the gardener to choke out those things. But the way Jesus tells the story is the farmer goes out and he sows, and it's just the way it is, as if to say, understand when you approach people that some people will have genuine faith and some people will have a shallow or a compromised faith, and some people will resist altogether. And the reason this is important is you can't determine the outcome. It's in the heart of the receiver, not the fault of the seed. And therefore, the responsibility of the Christian is to sow broadly and to let God bring about the results. At one point, Jesus tells another story about the weeds and the seed all growing together. And he says, listen, don't try to uproot the bad weeds, because in doing so, what you will do is you will destroy good crop. He says, let it all grow together. And when one day the harvest comes, I'll separate the wheat from the chaff. And it's his way of saying, again, you can't control this. Don't make this the focus of your life, trying to necessarily get good seed. Sow the seed. Let me deal with the results. So what does this mean? If you have a child who has left the faith and doesn't appear to be coming back, does it mean that you don't pray for it? challenge that. No, of course you pray for it, challenge them. But what it means is that there are different responses and you and I can't control it. And so it means you don't need to say, what did I do wrong? How come I somehow failed? What did I do that failed to produce faith? Or how did that at some point the responsibility's on the hearer? And that is part of Jesus' point. And I think we'd be remiss not to say that the teaching of the gospel of the Word of God is often spurned because people want other things. So make sure that if you're a hearer, that you pay attention to the depth of your own faith and to what could choke it out, and determine to say, I want my faith to always be in what Jesus Christ has done, who he is, and not what he gives me in this life, so that I'm not part of the shallow seed.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.